Okay, so in this wacky tutorial, I'm gonna be showing you how to fucking render shit in Blender. So first things first, download Blender. Obviously, I imagine you'll know how to do that. It really shouldn't be too difficult. I'm assuming you've got like basic knowledge of like file types and like file structures and stuff. So you just understand how to use Windows really. So don't feel free to ask like dumb questions though. It's not like I'll be mad if you ask something that should be really obvious. And then once you open up Blender, you're just gonna want to use the default scene. They'll ask you for some options. Just go whatever the default is. Delete everything in your scene, and then what you'll want to do is you want to go to this directory, this GitHub directory. I will link this in the description. I'll upload this to YouTube, and then in this video, I'm gonna go and render like the softball. And so you're gonna want the folder that says models and the OBJ format, and then weapons, and then you can just hit Control F and type in whatever. And so I would have gone Control F softball, and it would show up here. Some of the weapons have like weird names. You can just ask the North Star Discord if you're confused. And all you want to do is copy this directory, like click this link, paste it in, and hit enter. And what it'll do is it'll download a zip file with all this stuff in. And so what you can do is you can just open this up in whatever zip extractor you have, and you just want the OBJ file, you don't want anything else. And you can just drag that to your desktop like I have over here. After you've done that, what you want to do is go into Blender. You've already deleted everything in the scene so far. File, import, OBJ. It was my desktop folder. And then just load it in. And if it's not there immediately, you can just scroll out and it might be there. Problem is, this is not centered at all. The first thing you're going to want to do is click this and go to Object, Set Origin, Origin to Geometry. Basically, the origin is the point everything rotates and moves from. And so, for instance, if I rotate it now, the origin is in the center right there. If I go R, it'll rotate around this tiny little point in the middle right here. Whereas if I go Object, Set Origin to Geometry, it'll it'll rotate around the center of the object. And once you've done that, you're good to just either select these or this keybinds. There's G for move and R for rotate. I'll be using the keybinds, but feel free to just click the buttons and move them like this. And so I'll move them to like a bit above the center here. It's probably convenient. And so now you've got your model imported. I'll leave like basic camera controls and stuff. You're better off just watching a tutorial. Because I don't know if I'm really qualified to teach kind of low-level stuff like that. Then what you want to do is you want to go to the shading tab, and this is what you're going to do most of the rendering in. You want to switch to this little thing in the corner. That means the viewport will have the textures. It will display the textures. And you click on this. Make sure use nodes is enabled, and you've got nodes down here. So you don't need to worry about all this right now, because we still don't have the textures to put on the model. So again, you're going to want to go to this website again, textures, pilot guns, and then you're free to just go look up softball, Control F, and then again, just like the last one, copy and paste into this. Oops. Paste into here, hit enter, it'll download, extract it. I already got them all downloaded here. Once you've done all that, you've got the textures. You're gonna wanna first delete this, which seems kind of weird. This is what does all the tells Blender's rendering engine what each texture like corresponds to in terms of what's being drawn on screen. There's this custom one that we're gonna use that works with all the Titanfall stuff. So delete that for now. And what you do, file append. Basically, this just steals stuff from different like Blender files. And so we've already got a custom one set up that someone made years ago. Hold on. And I'll include the one I've made. All you need to do, I'll send you the .blend file that I'm making here. And all you need to do is find that. If you've just downloaded or whatever, it'll be in your downloads folder. And hold up, where did I put my stuff? Yeah. And what you want to do is go to node tree right here and just double click this. And then once you go in here, what you can do is add search s/g, and it'll show up right here. Plug the BSDF into the surface, and then from here you've got all these little things you can plug textures into. This is probably the most difficult part. So we've got all these textures, but we don't really know which ones here they correspond to. So let me just put this to the side of my screen real quick. So ignore these 4 at the bottom. I'll get to those later. Those are important. So diffuse just means the base color. So no fancy rendering techniques here. And so what you'll do is you'll want to find the one that just kind of looks like the regular colors in the model. And so it's this one quite clearly. Generally, none of the other ones have color, apart from the normal map over here. And something I'll get to in a second. All you want to do is drag it back and plug it in like that. And bam. We can get rid of... Hold up. Yeah, you see this stuff doesn't have a texture right now. We will get to that. It's generally safe to just, I don't know, get rid of that stuff, because this is like the pro screen, and this is like the ammo, and we don't have the textures for those, nor do we need them. Well, the next one up is the ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion is just, in corners like this, in real life, it would get a bit darker in the corner, just because there's less light bouncing around there. And that's just like a simulation of that, except in the texture. All you gotta do, again, drag it in, and plug it in. It will look a lot darker, but it looks correct. And it should be fixed when you're actually rendering it in the end. An important thing to keep track of is which texture does which, because it's hard to tell. So you've got this one. We'll ignore these for now. This, obvious because it's the color texture. Generally, the ambient occlusion texture, it's the brightest, like the brightest one there, apart from this one here, of course. But don't get it confused with this one. You can usually tell it's a lot softer. Notice how it kind of, the banding is much smoother than anything on this. This is very grainy and detailed. Next we got the specular map. The specular is, how do I explain this? It's how sharp and how detailed the reflections are from the model. And generally, a good guide to help you with this is look at the colors on the little node here, and that should be able to correspond. So specular is generally much darker than anything else, so you're looking for something around this color. It can also have color in, so just keep that in mind. So if we go back to that, so yeah, notice how it's roughly the same color, much darker compared to this one here. And so it might be a bit more difficult. The glossiness, this one here, and the specular are generally quite similar, but the darker one should always be the specular map. And you can kind of tell, you'll notice a weird difference. Things will look funny if you mix them up, and so you can always go back and change them. It's really easy. You just got to switch over the nodes. Next, the glossiness one, this one here. This is how reflective everything is. And so if you're really confused, if you can find like a shiny metallic part in the model, or one you expect to be, say around the rim here, and find it on this texture, the texture, this rim here should be right there. It should be really white, like bright, because it's maximum reflective. The brighter it is, the more reflective it is at that point. Is a good guide. So you plug that in. Cavity map, just basically the little black parts on it are where little dents are meant to be put in the model. It's really obvious. It's really white. Obviously, where it's a really obvious texture to know the difference between, just because it's so bright. And so, if you see that there, that's the cavity. And we just want to plug that in again. Normal, basically, I guess it details how the light reacts off to things that aren't 3D. So for instance, if you go into the flat model, this, hold on, we'll find a better example actually. Yeah, this right here is completely flat. There's no actual like 3D indentation there. But this texture, what it'll do, when we plug it in, it will simulate, it will make the light simulate that this is actually a 3D element. And so if you look now, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see it's a lot more 3D than before. The light reacts off different than it did before. And especially in-game, it makes a really like convincing 3D effect. The final one that we don't have here is the emission. Emission, it will be like a pitch black texture with like some green lights or whatever. And so if you've got, for instance, a softball in-game has like a, I don't know, like a bullet counter up here, right? It'll literally just be a black texture with the little bullet counter randomly somewhere in the middle of a black thing. All you do is plug it in and then it glows. It's pretty cool. That's basically us for this model, really. A problem with this is, though, obviously, you've still got these white parts here. Generally, if you were just extracting it raw from the game, it wouldn't be so much of, much of a problem. But since we downloaded it in the OBJ format and everything's turned into one model, it might be a bit annoying. What you want to do is you want to go to modeling, and so this will just give you a view of all the individual polygons and points that are connected, the model's connected by. I think we should be able to, yeah, go into this little thing down here. This is just the material selection menu, and so this has details for all the materials and shit. And what you can do is you can just select the material, hit select, and it'll select it on the model, like that. So I'm going to get rid of the ammo, which is this thing here. Let me deselect. And all I need to do is hit delete on my keyboard, or Control X or whatever. Delete vertices. And we'll do the pro screen as well, because I don't really want it. You can, like, put, like, the pro screen textures on and render that as well. It's kind of a pain, and you won't get the numbers. You'll have to do that manually. But generally, pro screen just kind of gets in the way of your renders. But getting to that, a problem we have right now is you can't see the textures on this railing here, because this railing is uses a completely completely different texture entirely, just like the pro screen does and just like the ammo did. And so we got rid of those two, but we're not getting rid of this. This won't be on the website. This will be a big pain. Some guns won't have like the additional textures like this like on the website. If you want, you can just ask me and I'll teach you how to extract them from the game files. It is a big pain though, so generally I would stick to just doing this stuff. Or at least when you're a beginner. If you do want to make something cool, do ask though. I'll be happy to help. And so this stuff I've extracted from the game files, and these are the textures for this little railing here. And so it's just the same as we did for the main thing, except in this texture sidebar again, you want to do ris_at, which means the railing. I don't know why it's called that, but yeah, same thing as before, /G blender, and then drag it into the sidebar, and I'm going to want, oh, this one's confusing as well, because they look very similar. We'll do the easy ones first. We'll just plug in the normal, and these are a bit confusing. So, presumably, we can eliminate things. One of these is going to be the diffuse, and probably one of these is going to be the specular and glossiness. It doesn't look like this snail map, because it would be really obvious. It would be like the whole thing's really bright with some dark spots. So the best thing you can really do here is just test it. I think this is probably the diffuse texture. or the color texture, like the base color, because in game this doesn't have any white spots. It has silver spots. But yeah, if you look at it here, if you stuck one of these in like this one, it would just look kind of funny, like, and not right.
Hey, Indy,
Yeah,
wanna go on the Minecraft server? Do you wanna come on with something?
I'll be on in a second. I'm recording a tutorial right now.
Huh?
I'm recording a tutorial right now.
Okay.
Okay, and so we have 2 left to pick from, and honestly, this is just trial and error. There's only 2 of them, luckily, so it's not a big a deal. So we'll try sticking this one. I think. Oh right, yeah, we can do the color thing. Since this one was lighter, it's probably a glossiness one. So you notice the color in this one is very similar to the color in this bit here. It probably is a glossiness one, and so this must be the specular one. And then bam, it looks right. If you get those 2 confused, and you switch them out, you'll notice it looks, I don't know, it just looks a bit odd and off. It kind of stands out a bit too much. And so if you switch them back, switch them around, it should look a bit nicer. And bam, you're basically done. Yeah, now we'll get to rendering. So you've got your thing all textured, and so we'll start with the camera object. So what we want to do in the layout, add camera, and then from there you can just drag it around with like the movement stuff or whatever. But a really, really useful trick is, okay, you gotta have some sort of numpad for this. I think you can rebind it, but it's better to just have a numpad, to be honest. Is, say, what you can do is you can just move the viewport into like a cool looking view of the gun. Say I want something like that, maybe? All you need to do is Control, Alt, and numpad 0. And what it'll do, it will, oh, hold on, I didn't have it selected. As long as you've got selected, just select it up here. God damn it. Oh, I didn't have my keyboard plugged in. No wonder it wasn't working. Yeah. Control, Alt, and numpad 0, and it'll snap right to your camera position. And then from there, let's just go full screen again, because we already done the textures. You've got this little camera thing at the bottom here. And all you want to do is mess with it till it works. So, focal length is just kind of the zoom. If you zoom really far out, it's like having a high FOV. So it kind of curves things, which is neat. And then Shift X and Shift Y just shifts the camera without shifting any of the angle. So for instance, if you move this, you can just select the camera while you're like looking in the camera view and hit G. Notice it'll like warp the view. If you just use Shift X and Shift Y, it won't warp the view. Use a bit of both of them to get a good effect. And I don't really know where I'm going to go with this, but that's good enough to me. Next, we're going to do lighting. So now that we've got our camera set up, yeah, we're still looking at the default lighting. That's only for like visualizing stuff. It doesn't actually show up when you render. So if you go to the real lighting, this one here right at the end, it's pitch black because there's no lights. So you're going to want to go add. There's a bunch of different lights. Go to light. There's point, which just emits light from a single point. There's sun, which emits light over the whole model like the sun. There's spot, which is like a round spot that emits light to. An area, which is the same as spot, except it's square. I'm going to drink water real quick. Give me a second. Okay, so we'll start with just the point light. And just drag it around, really. And so you'll notice it's really not lighting up a very wide area. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set the power all the way up. And you can just mess with this as you please. The light settings are just, the best way to learn about them is just to fuck with them. Radius doesn't really do anything. You can mess with these. Specular, how sharp the reflection is going to be. So if you turn it all the way down, it's still going to light up, but it won't have any of the nice sharp reflections and the metallic parts. Volume doesn't really do much in our context. It does stuff in other things, but You will notice the difference here. And diffuse is how much it lights up the color specifically part. So if you go back to shading and you remember this top one specifically, the one that's the base color, this is how much it lights up that. So if you turn that all the way down, it won't light any of the color of the model. It will only light up like the little highlights and the little 3D effect parts. And so I'll keep that pretty high, but I'm going to turn down specular a bit because I don't want it to be as shiny. Now, 1 point looks good. Oh, also this color, by the way. Color, generally, I'd recommend you only use light colors, because if you go really orange, it'll look really weird. Generally using a kind of a light tinge, light yellow tinge, or a light blue tinge is the best way to get a good kind of 3D looking effect with multiple lights. So you can just, copy them, C, V, and then move them around again to get another one. I want to make this one, in fact no, I'll get a spotlight object and area. Same thing really. You can use this as a pointer to drag it around. Let me just point out the model. And move it down a bit. And then increase the power to like 8 gajillion. And then I want that one to be a lot more blue. And you can press numpad 0 again to get back into the camera viewport. The thing to note from here, hold on. I'm just messing with it. Is like lighting that you use when you're actually taking photos in real life is completely applicable here. In fact, it's easier because you don't have to buy the lights. So if you want something to look really good, just look up like lighting guides for photography or modeling or anything like that, and just apply them here. It's real easy, and there's like a gajillion resources out there. There's also tutorials for lighting, doing like advanced techniques like reflections, like full like advanced reflections, and stuff like glass transparent stuff online. It will require a bit of effort, but it does look really good. There's some really cool stuff you can make, especially if you want to make cool Titanfall renders. And now that we've done all this, I think it looks good, but everything looks a bit dark around the edges. So I want to add one more thing. I'll just duplicate this and add it to the top. So Control C, Control V. In fact, I'll add a sun. So sun is kind of like this, except the size of the area it's emitting to is infinitely large. So it covers the entire scene. So this one is going to be really, yeah, you can kind of see it. That'll do. And I can just zoom out and mess with this until it looks good. Let's turn off diffuse there. No. I want to turn specular all the way up in this. That looks pretty good. So, it's not my favorite thing ever. I think I could have done a bit of a better job. But, it looks good enough. And now it's time to render. Before we render, there's two things you need to know. First is rendering engines. Whoops, wrong one. Rendering engines. And then your rendering output. This, before we do rendering engines, we'll go to the scene. And so, you've got your resolution. I'd recommend setting that to, I don't know, something relatively high. You'll notice it being weird immediately. So just mess with that before you do anything. And then your rendering engine is the most important part. Eevee is, how do I say this? Eevee runs a lot faster. So there's two of them. There's Eevee and Cycles. Ignore Workbench. Workbench is just the default one Blender uses. Eevee runs a lot faster and still looks pretty good, but Cycles looks even better and it does really good reflections, but you'll notice it takes ages and it shouldn't come out as grainy in the end. I'll show you what to do. Generally I use Cycles just because it looks a bit nicer, but Eevee is good for previewing, and if you don't really want to wait ages, just use Eevee. And so, important things, sampling. Sampling, think about, how do I explain this? A ray of light. Say this is a wall. In fact, no, say this is a corner. And say this is a ray of light coming in from the sky. Like a single ray. Well, what it's going to do is going to bounce. And it's going to bounce back. The sampling rate is how many times it can bounce, basically. And so if you've got something really complex like and then you've got like a yellow ray coming in from the side here, you're going to want a lot of bounces. So there'll be kind of, and like for Eevee, it'll generally not make too much of a difference, but for cycles it'll make a really big difference. And so yeah, this is high sampling. And high sampling, you wouldn't get that ray bouncing back. So, right, if it was low sampling rather, you wouldn't get that ray bouncing back to the camera here. We'll just say this is the camera. And showing that really niche little light detail. In Eevee, you can turn it like, let's just turn, so this viewport and render, we'll get to that in a second. Turn it down to like 1. And you'll not notice a difference. And then you turn it up to like 512. Barely a difference. You notice like a wee difference there. I think that might have just been a glitch. Yeah, there we go. So you see the lack of bounces has made this little jagged edge. But if you turn that up to like, I don't know, 12, it's basically gone. I'll recommend you turn it up to 32. Basically no performance hits for a very, very slight increase in quality. 12 is probably good enough though. Cycles is where it's really, really important. Because whereas Eevee isn't really too dependent on this, cycles is. So you see each little grain here, how it's really grainy and how some of the spots are just black. Hold on, we'll turn it back to Eevee for this, just so we can zoom in. Yeah, basically each one of these black spots is a ray of light that's been simulated. And so, the more samples you use, the more rays of lights it's going to shoot out and return. So it's really important that you have this quite high. But it will take a long time. So, problem is, even if you got it ridiculously high, you're still going to get a bit grain. Notice how that's kind of a bit rough and grainy. I don't know if it's going to show up on YouTube, but it is. What you can do is denoising, viewport, and render. Just turn them both on. It'll make it a bit blurry, but when you're actually rendering, it'll make it really sharp and really clean. It's just generally nice. And that's basically everything, really. I suppose I'll teach you how to do transparent backgrounds. You can do it with cycles as well, I think. I've forgotten, though, how to do it with cycles. It's really useful if you're making, like, I don't know, like a sequence or something cool. Like, you're putting, like, a custom background out of an image. We'll cut that. Yeah, all you want to do, all you want to do is hit F12, or if you just go into rendering, and I think there's a button for it. No, there's not. Okay. All you want to do is hit F12, and it'll bring you to this menu. It'll render it. I'm rendering Eevee right now. I'll switch back to cycles in a second. And so, Eevee it'll render like almost immediately. And so, yeah. The resolution is really dependent here. You notice it kind of looks a bit fuzzy and grainy. That's just because even if it's like 1080p, it still can look weird. Generally, if you've got the scale down, it won't be a problem though. Like, you won't notice that in like Discord or whatever. In cycles, I'll show you. Let me just set it to wireframe for this, so we can put all the resources into actually rendering it. It'll do it box by box, and this takes ages, but generally it's worth it at the end. It looks pretty good. And so if you notice, the reflections here are a lot nicer than they... if we just cancel this. In Eevee. So, yeah. I don't know if you could really see the difference there. But there is a bit of an improvement. Once you're done rendering, we'll just render Eevee again for convenience. You can go image, save as, and then you go send it to wherever. So yeah, I mean, you're done there. If you need I've missed out a lot in this video. There's a lot of stuff you might want to know or need help with. Please, 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 please ask me, because there is shitloads of stuff you can do in Blender. Basically, like everything in all of Titanfall 2 modding ends up using Blender at some point. All visual modding, that is. So if you're making custom models, obviously, if you're making skins, if you're doing like, even if you're just trying to make custom guns or whatever, or trying to figure out, like, I don't know, if you're trying to figure out the different properties of guns, for instance, it might reference a specific part of a gun, and you got to check that in Blender. There's shitloads of stuff you're gonna use Blender for if you want to get into Titanfall modding. And yeah, it's good for what I showed you specifically. We'll get into that now. Is I showed you a render of someone's skin, right? So we'll go back to their skin real quick. Where is it? There. And so this skin was up here somewhere. Yeah, here it is. So they're this is kind of annoying, but there's two ways to release skins. There's DDS and there is star packs. DDS is like star packs, just kind of like DDS compressed really nicely. But what you can do is, if you have someone who's released their skin as a DDS and not a mod on like the Thundergist or whatever, which will be a star pack, you can just download it, open it, and then go to the maximum resolution thing. They really didn't need all this stuff. They didn't really use it. But what you can do is you can just take their coal color and replace your diffuse texture with that. So for instance, here is a diffuse texture that I made for one of my skins. Over here, I'll do the Albania one because it's funny. Hold on, I don't have it there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we'll use the Albania one here. What I want to do is I'll just open that in Blender. Is all I want to do, yeah. Get the diffuse texture, delete that. Get the new one, and just drag it in. And bam, I've got rendered my skin. And it's looking pretty fresh. Yeah, so it's really, like, once you get used to it, it's really not that difficult. And it can be a lot of fun as well, because you can, like, once you get most of the effort is just getting everything set up, but once you're good at that, once you can do it consistently and quickly, you can get some really nice results really quickly. And do stuff like this in like 20 minutes. Now the background of this was just made in Photoshop. I don't use Photoshop. I wouldn't recommend you use it. It's not very good, especially for the price, and also it crashes a lot and it's pain. I would use GIMP, but I hate the fucking name. But you know, here we are. It's like a free Photoshop alternative, and it's really quite good. So let's just render this, and then save as in my downloads. We'll call it Albania or something. Albania.png. Save as image. Then downloads. Let's just drag in. Now, again, a bit like Blender, I'm expecting you to kind of learn the basics in your own time. You might even already know how to use stuff like this. Or you might already have Photoshop or use Paint.net or something else. But what you can do, yeah, you can just remove the background. You can render it with the transparent background. I'm dumb and I forgot how to do that. But you literally just search it up. It takes 5 minutes on Google. And yeah, for me, it's just easier to just delete it. So for instance, if I want to try and like create an alternative version of the one I did for that guy, I don't know, say I want like a kind of a dark red background. Darker. And then I want to select by one. Grow out. That's better. Okay. And then let's make this a gradient actually. Wait, wrong way around. That's not that bad, but yeah, we'll have something like that. It doesn't need to be perfect. I guess this is just an example. I expect you to spend 1,000,000 hours doing this, though. What? What? And what? Let's get all this, and then bam, rendered. That's kind of how you make something like that thing. And so, yeah. Thank you for bearing with me. I know this tutorial was shit. I wrote like some notes before doing this, but I like woke up and realized, oh fuck, I haven't made this tutorial yet, and I may have rushed it a bit, but I hope this does help. Again, just if you're confused at all, just ask me. So, thank you. Enjoy my stuttering and me talking to my brother halfway through. Yeah.